I want to thank the committee so much, Danny and Haley and Catherine and everybody, and Tony and Lee, who have been so nice and so gracious, and it's just such a treat and such an amazing gift to be here. Thank you so much. And my friend Danny for suggesting me, and it's so great to just be here with my friends. Like Carl and Danny and I have known each other for 100,000 years, it feels like, or is, and I'm here with my boyfriend and his brother, who I've also known for 30 years. So it's really great to be here. It feels like home. So I'm glad you guys are all here. I'll give you some important information so you can judge me properly. My sobriety date is February 1st, 1988. I will be celebrating 32 years of sobriety next week. It's really not that impressive when you really start to understand that I got sober at 5 years old. Because I'm only 37, so let's be really clear what's happening here. My home group is the Principles Before Personalities Big Book Study in Sherman Oaks, California, on Thursday nights at 7:30. So if you ever find yourself lost in Sherman Oaks on Thursday night, I hope you'll come find us. And my sponsor is Leslie E. And, I talk about those three things because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with any of those three things. I wanted not to be honest, not to be accountable, and not to be responsible, right? I didn't want to tell you what my sobriety date was because that may have meant I'd had my last drink and I wasn't sure that had happened, right? I absolutely did not want to sponsor because I didn't want anybody suggesting to me what I could or could not do differently, right? And I didn't want a home group because the truth is if you knew me, you wouldn't like me, and this way I don't like you first, so we're even. And that's the belief systems that I came into Alcoholics Anonymous with. I really came here believing that this was a drug and alcohol problem, and let's be 100% clear up front, like this problem is magnified 1,000% for me by alcohol and drugs, but it is only part of the problem. And I really believed that if I just got rid of the drugs and the alcohol, that everything would be fine. I really believed that everything would just even out. And if you're anything like me, you take drugs and alcohol away from this particular body, and stuff gets worse for me, not better. And it gets a little crazy. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in California with a father who was an alcoholic, and he was the love of my life. He was my most favorite person on earth. He was the kind of alcoholic who had a blood alcohol level of like 1,000 at any given moment, and he was just, he was always drunk. I never saw him sober till I was about 17 years old, but he was magical. He was super brilliant and super funny and charismatic, and he had this amazing ability that no matter how many people are in the room or how many people were vying for his attention, if you stood there and had a conversation with him, he could make you feel like you were the only person on the planet. At least that was my experience with him. And he was just my most favorite person in the world. And him being an alcoholic doesn't make me an alcoholic, but let me tell you, it helped. I don't really remember my first drink. I have pictures of me in diapers with a beer can tipped up, so I'm not really clear on the first drink. Because when you grow up in an alcoholic home, that's just everywhere. I grew up in a house where, drugs and alcohol was a part of everyday living. My father worked in the rock and roll industry. He designed album covers. Anybody who was born in this century doesn't know what that is, but most of you do. Thank you. I don't have to explain it. And he designed album covers, so he had a lot of really cool friends, right? Like all these crazy musicians would show up on tour buses and pull up to our house and get off the bus and stay for 6 weeks in between different legs of a tour. And, we'd have drunk, naked musicians running around the house all the time. And I didn't know that wasn't normal. I didn't know that was only happening at my house. I thought that was happening at everybody's house. Like, don't you have drunk, naked people everywhere? Like, they're just on the streets, aren't they? Like, where. So that was just what I grew up in. And it was a great place to grow up. I didn't know, it wasn't violent at my house, which I'm super grateful for. It wasn't, it was sexually charged, but we were not sexually molested. I don't know how. I really don't know how. But, and it was just, it was a fun atmosphere, and it was a party, and everything was a party all of the time. And my parents got along for as far as I could tell, and, it was great. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and it seemed like utopia. It just seemed like a great place to be, Like I said, I don't remember my first drink, but I do remember my first drunk. I have cousins that are older than me. And I don't know about you, but my cousins loved to turn me on to stuff, right? They taught me how to dye my hair and shave my head and tie my bondage pants, important things. And what bands to listen to, how to swear, those kinds of things. And my oldest cousin was graduating from high school, and and she invited me to this party. And I was, of course, I'm going to go to this party. I mean, it's all high school kids. She was 18, so I was 11 possibly, and I was the kind of kid when I was 11. I was taller than everybody else. I had boobs. They haven't grown since, but that's an outside issue. Well, one of them did, but again, that's an outside issue. And I didn't look like I was 11. I just have always looked older than I was. And so I just remember going to this party and my mom dropping me off. And I remember walking up the walk to this party, and my head was on fire. But that wasn't new information for me, right? Like, my head had been on fire since I was born. Like, I was constantly thinking about, what were you thinking of me? Was I funny enough? Was I cute enough? Did my butt look cute in these jeans? Did I swear right? Did I like the bright bands? Like, all I could think of was what you were thinking about me and whether or not you liked me. Because my entire life, my entire being of who I was contingent on whether or not you liked me. And so all I could think about was those things. And so I walked into this party with a head full of crazy going on, and they were sitting around a card table playing quarters. And I don't know about you, but I'm afraid of looking stupid. So I walked in and I sat down and started playing like I've been playing all 11 years of my life. And, and I started to drink, and I started to feel the alcohol go into my system. And all of a sudden, everything got lighter, right? My arms got lighter, my chest got lighter, like everything was hysterical, right? But the greatest thing about that night was that for the first time in my life, my whole 11 years of life, right, everything that was going on between my ears had stopped. And it was as quiet as that moment we just had. And that had never happened for me before. And that was magic, right? That was magic. Did I become a daily drinker at 11? No. But did I become obsessed with how do I make that feeling happen again? How do I make that crazy go away? Absolutely, right? Up until that point, I was a kid who had pretty good grades, all my teachers loved me. I was a dancer, and I had a really promising career as a dancer. And all these great opportunities and scholarships coming up to go study with some of the greatest ever. And all of a sudden, my whole life after that moment took a sharp right turn, and all I could think about was, what do I have to do to make that happen again? Who do I got to hang out with? Where do I got to go? What do I got to do, right? And that was my whole life focus. My whole life just shifted. And all of a sudden, I started being this kid who was hanging out in places she shouldn't have been hanging out in, My father's alcoholism progressed, as it does, and he started to get really sick. He had his first grand mal seizure, and on a ladder, actually. He had a grand mal seizure on a ladder, and he landed on my brother. And I only know that particular day because I had gone to a friend's house after school, and I had called to check in and tell my mom where I was. And I said, hey, Mom, I'm, wherever I am. And I said, what's going on? She said, well, your dad's in the hospital. And I said, why? What's going on with him? And she said, well, he had a seizure. And I said, well, is he okay? And she goes, well, no. And I said, well, what? And she said, he has alcoholism. She was in her own house, whispering. Right? Like, alcoholism. Like, if you say it quieter, it's not as bad or something. I don't know. But I remember that day because that one word would change my life from that point forward. I'd never heard the word alcoholic. I'd never heard the word alcoholism. I had no idea what it was. But from that point forward, my life was never the same again. My mom became obsessed with trying to get my father sober, and she chased him in and out of rehabs all over the place. And they finally grabbed her and sent her to Al-Anon. And thank God for Al-Anon. So all the Al-Anons that are here, thank you so much for my life, because I would not be here. Feeling, go away. Okay. And I don't do well with those. And, so anyway, they grabbed her and took her to Al-Anon, and they took her to Al-Anon, and they said, oh, you have kids? We have meetings for your kids. We have Alateen. It's for kids with alcoholic parents, and they can go and sit and talk about how crazy y'all are and get some solutions, and it'll be great. So my mom came home and told me all about this craziness, right? And I'm standing there listening to her like, is she out of her mind? Like, it's bad enough you gave me this whacked out name. Now you want me to go to some place to talk about how crazy you people are? No, thank you. Like, I don't need any more reasons to be weird. I already feel weird enough. There's too many reasons to be weird. I'm not going to your damn Alateen meeting. Not happening, right? But I lost that battle because I was 12. And, and I just remember going, oh my God, if I have to go to this stupid meeting, like I'm going to be as faded as I can handle. And I got as stoned as I could stand, right? So that I could at least walk to the car. And I just remember getting in the back seat of my mom's car and driving over the hill to go to this meeting. And just being so stoned and coming up with, well, I'm not going to go to the meeting. I'll go for a walk. I'll go rob a liquor store. I'll go sit in a bush. Like, I'll go do anything, but I am not going to this stupid meeting. And I was just like, you'll just entertain yourself. You'll come up with something. It'll be fine, right? So she pulls up in front of the church, and I look out the window, and I saw the most beautiful boy I have ever seen in my entire life. And I'll have you know, I went to Alateen religiously for 7 years. Because this is a program of attraction rather than promotion. We don't really care what attracts you here, just stay. And it was great. I had a great time, right? We would go and we would sit in these meetings and we would talk about how whacked out our parents are, and then we would go try it. And and there was a market across the street, and we'd leave the Alateen meeting and go across the street and pimp alcohol from across the street, get hammered, and our parents would pick us up. And somehow they had no idea. Like, I don't know how they didn't know, but they didn't know. And it was great, right? And my mom was just so focused on trying to get my dad sober, she wasn't really paying attention to what was going on with me. And it was also just a very different time. These days I have 2 kids. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. I got LoJack on their asses. Like... I know where they are at any given moment of any given day, and I can find them and hunt them down, and without their even knowing I'm doing it, which is fantastic. And but they didn't have that when I was growing up, and so it was really easy to get away with a lot of the stuff I got away with and did as a result of my alcoholism because nobody could find me, and it was great. I was the kind of kid who, I could look one way on the outside and be a totally different way on the inside. But I could also live life like that too. I would go and be at school and be normal and try to function as normal as I could at home. And then I'd go to bed at, 7 o'clock at night, because that's what teenagers do. And, and get dressed and slide out the window of my house, take a cab from Encino to Hollywood and go dancing all night in the clubs and doing drugs and smoking cigarettes and drinking and having sex with boys and anybody really. And I was an equal opportunity employer. And that's what I was doing. I'd get home by 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, slide back in the window, sleep for 2 hours, and go to school and act like everything was normal. And I would do this 3 or 4 nights a week, and for a 13-year-old, for a 14-year-old, for a 15-year-old, that's not normal behavior, right? Like, I love when people talk about, social drinking. There's no such thing as social drinking under 21. There's no such... 15-year-olds don't drink socially, period, They just drink to get hammered. That's the only reason they're doing it, right? And because your mom's coming, so you got to hurry up, And she's coming down the hall. Get it down. And so anyway, my alcoholism was starting to escalate, and it was fun. My mom loved Alcoholics Anonymous. She still loves Alcoholics Anonymous. She loves the program of Al-Anon, and she had absolutely no problem putting her 13-year-old daughter on a train and sending her to San Diego with $200 in her pocket to go to the SoCal convention and hang out with her friends, right? Never mind, I was in a hotel room with 16 other Alateens, and we were drunk, butt naked, covered in shaving cream most of the weekend. But that's what my alcoholism looks like when it's working, I don't know about you, but I don't know how to drink and not get naked. Like, I always, there's always 3 things that usually happen when I drink, right? I would black out, I would usually punch somebody in the face, but I always woke up naked. And I woke up naked in the strangest of places. I could never figure out how I got there. I had this thing with clothes. For a long time, I thought I was just allergic to clothes. Like, maybe I'm a nudist. Maybe, this has nothing to do with alcohol. That cousin who liked to turn me on to stuff, she and I were still speaking at the time, and she took me to, she was like, let's go hang out. And we went and we did some special effects. We snorted a bunch of coke and smoked a bunch of joints, and I don't know, it felt like the longest get ready to go out ever. And it really did. I was like, are we ever going to leave? Like, let's go, And but she had a lot of things to do apparently, and so then we got to this bar in Santa Monica, and I looked at my watch, and it was like 10:30, and these guys had just walked up and were talking to us, and the next thing I knew, it was like 5 o'clock the next morning, and I was in the alley across the street from Grumman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, and I was bleeding, and I was barely clothed, and I was sleeping next to a bum. And it wasn't the first time I had blacked out. It wasn't. Like, I had blacked out before, but I usually blacked out naked, woke up naked at home or at a friend's house. I usually woke up in places where I knew where I was. But this was the first time that I had blacked out somewhere, and I knew that this wasn't normal. And the only reason I knew it wasn't normal is because I'd been around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd been around the rooms of Alateen, I'd been around the rooms of Al-Anon, and I had heard you guys talk about your consequences of alcoholism. And I knew that what was happening to me was not normal. That was the only thing I knew, right? I just knew that my reaction to alcohol was not normal. And so at 15 and a half years old, I decided to get sober, right? But I didn't want to tell anybody, right? Because if you tell somebody you're sober, then you have to be accountable. And I'm not interested in your opinion, really. Unless it's a good one. And so I didn't really want to tell anybody, but I decided to get sober. And I would go to meetings in Orange County, which was like, I don't know, an hour away from my house, on the weekend and hang out with all my AA friends in Orange County. And we would go to meetings and do the deal and go to dances and do all that kind of stuff. And then during the week, I'd come home and I'd be Quincy of Encino, and I would go to school and I'd act like a normal person. And, and I was never the same person at the same time, right? The person that everybody over here in Orange County needed me to be, I would behave that way so that you would like me. And then I would come home, and everybody who needed me to behave a different way over here, I would be that person, right? Because at the end of the day, my fear, the fear that runs me the most, is you not liking me. If you don't like me, I can't survive, right? I don't know how to be on the planet without you liking me. And so if that means I got to lie, cheat, and steal to you so that you'll like me, I'm all about it. If that means I've got to, jump off bridges or whatever it is that I got to do to make you like me, I will do it, Even if it scares me to death, even if I know it's wrong, even if, right, it puts me in more harm than it does good, right? That's just how my fears run my life. And I have no skills. Like, I'm going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm sitting in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm listening to you guys tell your stories, and all I'm doing in these meetings is sitting there comparing myself to you, right? Because I don't really understand what it means to be an alcoholic, because I'm not really interested in deep information, right? I don't want to know, right? Because if you know, you can't unknow, right? And that's dangerous, dangerous. And so I didn't really want to know. But I would go to these meetings and I would listen to you talk about your alcoholism, and I would, I went to one meeting and I heard some guy talk about, he blacked out and tried to steal a battleship. I was like, well, I'm not as bad as that guy, But then I heard this one woman talk about, she blacked out, or she was at home and she was drinking and she tripped and broke her nose, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm a little bit worse than her, And so I would sit and compare myself to all of you, figuring that that's how you decide, because this is a self-diagnosed program. So if I'm self-diagnosing myself, what am I self-diagnosing myself against, right? You? I mean, if you say you're an alcoholic, and that's what makes you an alcoholic is your consequences, right? Then maybe mine aren't so horrible, right? So I sat in the back of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time, and I stayed sober for about 2 years, and then I got the easiest thing you can give an alcoholic besides a drink, right? And that was a resentment at somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to build a case. Any case builders here, right? I started to build a case, right? Because I don't know about you, but I'm a lawyer by obsession, right? I can build a case about why I am right, about how wrong you are, right? Because if I can build a solid enough case about why I'm right, about how wrong you are, then I don't have to be different, because you're the problem, I'm not the problem. I didn't do anything wrong. But let me give you the list of things that you did wrong, right? And that was my justification forever, right? Always my justification. So I start to build this case, and I decide, you know what? I'm 18 years old at this point. I've been sober for 2 years. I'm 18 years old. Maybe I'm not really an alcoholic. Like, maybe it was just a phase I was going through, right? Maybe it was just, who knows? Maybe I was just having a hard time. My parents were getting divorced, whatever, blah, 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 all the excuses. Like, maybe it wasn't that bad, right? So within 20 minutes of making that decision, I was out and off to the races one more time. And again, one more time, my alcoholism had progressed even while I was sober, right? Even while I was not putting substances into my body. Because I don't know how many people in here have been sober and then gone out being a retread. It is the worst feeling in the world to try to get drunk with a head full of AA and a belly full of booze. That's the worst feeling ever. You have to stay so drunk. Oh my God, just to make those people shut up. And they are loud, they're so loud. And they're laughing, and they're loud, So I went from blacking out here and there once in a while to blacking out for almost the entire 6 months that I was out there. And that's just what happens for me. And I don't know about you. I don't have to remember what I did to know that I am more than willing to compromise myself and demoralize myself on any level because I've done it sober. So imagine what I'm willing to do loaded, right? I don't have to remember what happened, but I do know that when I woke up on February 1st of 1988, I was mad. I came to and I was mad. And I was mad because I don't know if you figured this out about me or not, but I'm kind of a mouthy broad. And and my favorite thing to do was to go to bars, get as hammered as I could, and pick a fight with the biggest, ugliest guy in the room. Right? Just to see if he'd kill me. Like, that was my game. Like, let's see if I can get this guy to kill me, And they never did, and I don't understand how I didn't end up hogtied in the back of somebody's car and driven off the end of the Santa Monica Pier. But for some reason, I had a power greater than me that was protecting me, that had another idea for me, because I should have been hurt a heck of a lot more than I was, just because of my mouth alone. That was enough. So, but I woke up on February 1st, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to function. See, I don't know about you. I have no skills. I have absolutely no skills for resolving the conflict that lives within this body. None. My skill for resolving conflict was to drink and use. That was my skill, because it would make it go away. Right? All of a sudden, if I was conflicted and I put some of that magical honeydew dust on me, right, then all of a sudden I don't feel conflicted anymore. I don't feel anything. And that's magic for me. Right? So I wake up and I'm mad because I can't die. I can't stay sober. I don't even want to be sober. I don't want to live. I don't want to be here. I have no idea which way to go or what to do, right? I feel like I've burned every bridge on the planet. I feel like every person on the planet hates me. I hate myself. I'm not even worth the effort, But I said a prayer that I believe every alcoholic says at some point or another, and I didn't know at the time that it was a prayer, but I said, help me. Now, I don't know who I said that to. I don't know about you, but I grew up in a home where my father was an atheist and my mother was an atheist too. I didn't find that out for a very long time. She used to say to me all the time, you should go to church. You should go to church, right? I remember thinking, why? Why does she want me to go to church so bad? Like, she doesn't go anymore. She hasn't gone in 100 years. Why does she want me to go to church? And something tragic happened in our family, and I said something about, well, God's got this. And she goes, yeah, sure he does. And I was like, what do you mean, you don't believe in God? She goes, no. I go, so why do you want me to go to church? She goes, to find a man. That's how spiritual she is on that side, okay? The other side, my father, I remember saying to him when I was 5, hey, Dad, who's God? He said he was. That was the end of my religious upbringing. Explains my relationship with men, too. Anyway, but I said that prayer, and I don't know what happened next. All I know is I went into my room and I detoxed for a couple of days, and my mother, being the beautiful, wonderful Al-Anon that she is, finally kicked my door down and said, you need to go to a meeting. And I remember thinking, oh God, like not again. Like I'm not going back to that place. Like y'all are drama queens and gossip mongers, and I am too, but I am not one of you. And And I am not going back, right? But I don't know if you're like me either, in the sense that, like, I can't stand my own company. So I started to get super irritable and super uncomfortable, and I was like, I gotta get out of this house before I kill somebody, you know? And I went to a meeting, and somehow y'all knew I was new. Not sure if it was the Daisy Dukes and the bikini top and the candies I was wearing, but y'all knew I was new, and you were super, super nice to me, and I was so grateful, right? You'd come up, and you would remember my name, and you would give me cigarettes, and you would invite me to, you know, coffee, and we would go hang out at Jerry's Deli all night and drink coffee and smoke cigarettes. This was a very, very long time ago, obviously. And you'd invite me to dances at the Platonic Temple, and it was great, right? And all of a sudden, there was this whole group of people that I was hanging out with. Actually, Andy and Chris were in, my boyfriend and his brother were in that group of people that I was hanging out with. It was all a whole bunch of young people. And, you know, for those of you that are new to Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I hope you find a posse of people, right? Because this information, like all of this information that's coming out of the book or coming out of speakers or you're hearing at meetings, it takes a long time for that stuff to sink in and make any kind of sense. So between here and when God kicks in, you need a posse, right? You need people to hang out with, because I got to tell you, it's lonely to try to do this by yourself. It's more lonely than it needs to be, right? We have the ability to extra loneliness things, right? Like it's like an extra button we have, and it's horrible, right? But I got this group of people, and it was great, and we started hanging out and doing all kinds of great things, and I started to have fun. Because when I got sober, I was afraid I was never going to have fun again. Ever, 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 right? I was never going to be able to go dancing again. I was never going to be able to just laugh and have a good time. Not that I was doing that to begin with, but, you know, I was never going to have any of those things again that I had once upon a time. And so I had started to have fun. And then that fateful day happened when a crusty old-timer walked into my life. You know the kind. Old, crusty, 500 years sober, gives you an opinion without you asking for it. Those guys, you know them, right? And this crusty old guy walks up to me, and he looks at me, and he's like, hey, you need to get a job. And I was like, whoa, 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 old guy, whoa, shh. Nobody is talking to you, shh. He said, no, you need to get a job. He said, you have way too much time on your hands, and if you don't get a job, you're going to get loaded. And he scared me to death, right? Scared me to death, because I was petrified of getting drunk again. I knew in that moment, right? I knew in that moment that drugs and alcohol did not work for me. It wasn't an option, right? It didn't get me dead. It didn't get me far enough removed that I could stay there. I couldn't function that way at all, right? So I knew that drugs and alcohol had stopped being an option, right? I just didn't know how to be here without anything else. I mean, look, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous with two skills, right? I could either punch you in the face or sleep with you, and if you were lucky, you got them both at the same time. Other than that, I had no skills, right? And so when this crusty old guy says to me, you know, you need to get a job, I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I didn't graduate from high school. I can't find my ass with both hands most days. Like, what kind of a job do you get with those skills, right? So I had a friend who was in rehab at the time, and she had invited me to come to this rehab so she could make amends to me. And I went to this rehab, and I walk in, and there's all these people just sitting around talking about AA and the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. And I'm like, I could do that. Like, I could sit around and talk to people all day long. Like, how hard could that be, right? So I go and I get an application, and at the top of the application, it said, what's your sobriety date? Well, I'm a lot like Bill W. in the sense that I fancy myself a leader and see myself running vast enterprises with the utmost of assurance. And I'm going to prove to the world that I'm important, right? And I thought, if I put down that original sobriety date, maybe they'll give me a better job, right? I mean, hell, I don't remember that 6 months. How will you? Right? I mean, we're only as sober as we say we are. It's not like Johnny's standing at the door going, oh, Quincy has 45 days today. Like, we're as sober as we tell each other. It's the honor system amongst liars, thieves, and cheaters. Woo! Okay. So I put down my original sobriety date, and they gave me a job, and I got to tell you, it saved my life, right? Because I started going to work, and I was working 8 to 12 to 16 hours a day, strapping kids to beds, throwing them in the druggy buggy, taking them to a different meeting every night. It was fantastic for somebody who wants no accountability, right? Because I was never in the same meeting twice, right? I was like smoke going through Alcoholics Anonymous, just cruising around, right? And nobody knew me except for the people I worked with, and I could care less about them. So it was, I was just kind of doing my thing. And February 1st of 1989 rolled around, and I was driving to work, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I have a year sober. Like, I have a real year sober. Oh my God. Wow. I was so impressed with myself. I was like, wow, I got a year sober. And but I had a problem, right? Because I've been lying about how much time I had sober for the whole year. And again, I don't have any skills, right? I can't sleep with everybody to make that go away. I mean, I tried, but I can't. So how do you solve a problem like that, right? So on my drive to work, I decided, I'm just going to get drunk. Oh, stop it. I'm just going to get drunk, right? Because then you'll be like, oh, poor pathetic Quincy can't get sober. Here, you can come sleep on our couch. We'll give you cigarettes. You would nurse me back to health, right? But if I'm a liar, you might throw me out of A&E. Because nobody lies here, ever. That was a lie right there. So I was, this is my decision. I'm going to go and have a drink. And the truth is I didn't know about what alcoholism really meant at that point. Like, remember, I think that this is really about drugs and alcohol. I really think that if I just put the drugs and alcohol down, that everything will even itself out, right? And let's be clear, like, a lot of things died of neglect as a result of me not drinking. Like, that happened for sure, right? But at the same time, I still had no skills to resolve the conflict that lived within this body, that lived within this mind. I didn't know how to help myself. I didn't know how to do anything, right? So I go to work and I walk in and my head is just hanging, right? And this girl I'd never seen before looks at me and says, oh my God, you look like hell. And I was like, oh, nice to meet you too. She said, well, what's your problem? I said, well, I have a year sober today. And she goes, oh my God, that's so exciting. She's like, you should be jumping up and down. She's like, that's so great. She's like, I don't understand. What's the problem? I said, well, everybody here just saw me take a cake for 4 years a month ago. She thought that shit was as funny as you do. And I'm like, this is not funny. This is my life we're talking about. She goes, trust me, Quincy, nobody is thinking about you as much as you are. That was shocking to me. Shocking. What do you mean they're not thinking about me? And I tell that story because that's why it's one of my most favorite paragraphs in the back of the book. It says, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness are the essentials for recovery. Essentials, which means you cannot recover without them. And it would take me a long time to understand that there's a huge difference between physical sobriety and mental, emotional, and spiritual recovery. They're not the same thing. I thought that they were, but they're not, right? Honestly, all you need of those three things is one of those things to be physically sober, right? You just need to be willing to not pick up a drink or a drug, and you'll be physically sober for a really, really long time, right? But if you want to recover, you need all three. And I had never told the truth in my entire life, ever. So not only was it a great moment because here I felt like, oh, I have arrived, I'm on the road to recovery, but I actually really believed that there was a power greater than me. For the first time in my life, I had acted contrary to how I thought, how I believed, and not at my own volition. It happened out of nowhere, right? I asked that girl, that girl became like my best friend, and we were thick as thieves, and we were joined at the hip, and we had a great time. And, I'm one of those kind of alcoholics that, like, when I do something good, I think I deserve a reward. Oh, you don't relate to that? No rewards for you guys, right? You don't want a cookie or a purse, a pair of shoes. Well, I wanted a boyfriend. And I found him, and I had to have him. He was so cute. He was it. I had to have him, right? but they really don't like it when you date the patients. I don't know why. They just don't. And I had to have him, so I was like, I'll just get another job, right? So me and the newcomer, we're going to move in together, right? Oh, you know how this one ends too? We're going to move in together, right? And I go and I gather up all my stuff and load up my car, and we'd signed a lease on a house and had furniture, and we'd pull up, and I get to the house, and I walk up to the front door, and on the front door there's a Post-it note that says, "Sorry, babe, split town with my pregnant ex-girlfriend." I lost my mind. There was tears and snot and stuff just flying everywhere. Like, I didn't know what to do with myself. I have no skills. I have no idea what to do. Like, I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? My friend looks at me and she goes, "You know what you need?" I said, "What?" She said, "A sponsor." I said, "Do you know one?" She said, "Yes, my stepmom, she's a sponsor." I'm like, "Take me to her right away." Like she's a genie. So she takes me to this woman's house, and I'm crying and sobbing. Oh my God, I'm so, you know. And she says, "I have the perfect solution for you. It's going to solve all of your problems." I said, "Oh my God, I'm willing to do whatever you tell me. Anything, just tell me whatever. What do I do?" She said, "Well, Quincy," she said, I think you should be a stripper." And I thought, well, she's in AA. Isn't that an AA suggestion? Okay. Right? And it was great, right? I got a job as a stripper. I wasn't even 21, made a fake ID out of 2 pieces of shelf paper, went down, got a job at the bar, and I had a great time. And I hooked up with all the other sober strippers, and we were this sober stripper posse from hell. And we would go to meetings together and conventions together, and we all learned how to play pool, and we hustled pool all over the state of Arizona, California, and Nevada. Had a great time, made a ton of cash. I had to change the word before that. And made a ton of cash. And my best friend, who was the lead stripper in this club, right? Lead stripper. She had decided to leave the business and join the circus. True story. She was going to leave, and so we decided to have a going away party for her. And she had this boyfriend who was sometimes her boyfriend and sometimes not. And when she didn't want a boyfriend, she would just tell him that she was with me, right? So he and I hated each other, right? Like we would just had all this contention because we were carrying all her secrets. And so we go to this party, and he walks up to me at this party, and he says, she's leaving town. He was sober also, and he said, we should maybe, make amends to each other. And I said, all right, well, we can do that. So he calls me, and we go meet for coffee, and we made amends. Yeah. Y'all know how this one ends too, right? I'm just so original. And then we made some other things. And let's be really, really clear, right? There are rules amongst strippers and hoes, right? Rules. And that is that you do not sleep with your friend's boyfriend, no matter whether she likes him or not, right? I went from making $1,000 a day to making $7 a day. Right? And even $7 a day living at your mama's house is not easy to live on, right? So what do you do when you're a used-up stripper hoe? Where do you get a job after that, right? I went into real estate like any good stripper. I would love to tell you that I had learned my lesson, that I had saw the error of my ways, and I fell into Alcoholics Anonymous with so much grace and dignity, and I became magical. But that's not the case, right? See, I told you at the beginning, I'm a case builder, right? I'm a lawyer by obsession, and I am a professional case builder of building cases against why you are wrong and why I am right about how wrong you are. Right? And I don't know if you can do this here, but in LA, this is the greatest thing about LA, right? There's over 3,000 meetings a week in Los Angeles County alone, right? And I got sober on the west side of Los Angeles, right? And the same thing started to happen to me over and over and over again, right? But it was you people, not me, right? I was on the west side of Los Angeles. I went to meetings. I built a life. I had all these friends, right? I started to make decisions based on self that later placed me in a position to be hurt, right? I would build a case about why you were wrong and I was right about how wrong you are. And if you go from one side of LA, cross a mountain range, and go to meetings in another area, you will never see those people ever again. Right? So I kept pulling geographics in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And so now I'm in the West Valley, right? And I go to meetings and I build a life and I have all these friends and I start making decisions based on self that later place me in a position to be hurt, right? I start to build a case about why y'all suck, and I decide, y'all, I don't need to be here anymore. This is bad, right? And I don't want to leave AA because I know I'm an alcoholic. I know that drinking and using is not an option for me. But these meetings, you people in these meetings, these particular meetings, you're the problem, right? And if you cross a freeway, it's just like crossing a mountain range. Poof, you never see those people ever again, right? So now I'm in the East Valley, right? And I'm about 12 years sober, right? And I'm still doing the same thing at 12 years sober. Because again, I came here believing this was a drug and alcohol problem, right? I didn't understand the mental obsession. I didn't understand the spiritual malady. I didn't understand even the physical part of this, really. I didn't understand any of it because I hadn't read the book and I wasn't reading the 12 and 12 and I didn't have a sponsor consistently. I mean, you guys would say, go to meetings, get a sponsor, get a commitment, right? That's what you would say. I was a professional meeting goer. Like, I'm really good at going to a lot of meetings, right? But then you said, get a sponsor. And it was like, I don't know about you. I don't know how to cultivate a relationship with anybody. Like, I take hostages. Like, people end up hogtied in my trunk. That's how I have relationships, right? So I don't want to cultivate a relationship with somebody I don't know and don't really want anything from. So how do you do that? I never knew how to do that, right? So around 13 years sober, I was in that place one more time where I was convinced that Alcoholics Anonymous was the problem. Alcoholics Anonymous is the problem. Y'all are drama queens and gossip mongers, and I am too. But this is about you, right? And I don't need to be here because this place is crazy, right? And I walked into a meeting, and it was the last time I was ever going to go to a meeting ever. And I said to my friend, I said, if I don't hear something different in this meeting, I am never going back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was a big book study. And the way I got to that particular big book study was that the woman who apparently had been my sponsor for like 3 or 4 years prior to that moment, she went to this meeting. And I had only had maybe 4 conversations with her in the 3 years she was my sponsor, right? Because I told you, I don't know how to ask for help. I don't know how to ask questions. I don't even think I need to because I'm not the problem. You are. So what do I need help with, right? Seriously. So I go to this meeting and I'm sitting there. And it's a big book study, and it's the kind of meeting where there's a crusty old guy, like you, Bill. And, right? And he reads like 4 or 5 pages out of the book, and then it's a sniper meeting, right, where they pick on you. You share. Yeah. You share. You share, right? I'm like, oh, God, right? And I'm sitting there with my arms crossed and my snarl on, trying to keep you all away from me, right? And my crusty old-timer looks at me because he's really good at spotting broken, and he's like, you, happy pants, share. And so I vomit all over this meeting about how much I hate Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hate you people, and I don't want to be here, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. It was gross, right? Like, there wasn't a newcomer in the room that could top it, because you got to be 13 years dry to be that crazy, right? But I got it all out, because the one thing I did know in Alcoholics Anonymous is no matter what, you take your ass to a meeting and drop it, and I did. And at the end of the meeting, another beautiful old-timer walked up to me, and he put his hand on my arm, and he said, Quincy, he said, AA is full of sick people. Do not expect them to act well. And I knew in that moment that not only was he talking about you, he was talking about me, right? He was talking about me. See, I'd been carrying the disease of alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for 13 years and had absolutely no clue that that's what I was doing. None. I had no idea what alcoholism was. None, right? The next person that walked up to me was the craziest, scariest person in the whole world. Because she was the kind of person, I'm assuming probably like Catherine, whose whole deportment shouts that she has a real answer. And I don't know about you, but I had spent my entire life staying away from people with a real answer, right? Because I don't really want one, right? But she walked right up to me and right through my force field and shoved her card right into my hand. And she said, Quincy, I am really good at doing column work, and if you want to get free of those resentments, I can help you. I remember thinking, what resentments is she talking about? I don't know what she's talking about. I'm not mad at anybody. Right? Because that's how unaware I was, right? So I walked up to the woman who was my sponsor at the time, and I said, listen, I think I am dying from alcoholism, and I could really use some direction. She said, well, Quincy, I sentence you to this meeting. I remember thinking, okay. And I don't know about you, but I had been going to meetings at this point for 20 years. 20 years I had been in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous doing what I thought was the deal. And I was no freer of the bondage of self that lived between my two ears in that moment than I was then when I got here. If anything, I was worse, right? You know, I love meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love them, right? They're my most favorite place in the world, right? Because there's not a story in this room that doesn't need to be told. Every one of us, like me, Danny, Carl, everybody in this room has a story that is important to Alcoholics Anonymous. And alcoholics are fascinating people to me, right? And I love meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous because this is also where I come to practice these principles on your personalities, right? But going to meetings to get recovery, it's kind of like watching porn to be a better lover. Right? You might get some good ideas there, but if you don't get in there and do the work, it ain't happening. Right, girls? Let's just be clear. Right? So I called the crazy, scary lady and I said, look, I don't know what to do. I said, how do we do this column work? She said, well, do the first two columns and then call me when you're done. And she lived down the street from me, and I put it on paper and I went to her house, and here's my 30-second commercial. There is absolutely no wrong way to work the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous other than to not do them. That's it, right? That's it. I have been the arrogant ass who has stood up here and said, if you're not doing it my way, then you're really not experiencing Alcoholics Anonymous. And let's be clear, that is not true. Every person in here will have gone through the steps, will go through the steps, will take people through the steps differently. Every one of them. And every one of them is right. Every one of them, right? My only disclaimer to that is that if you have not experienced the freedom that Alcoholics Anonymous guarantees in the process, please ask somebody else to help you until you find that freedom, right? Period. Because we all have different information, right? We all have different information. The teacher shows up, right, Tony? The teacher shows up when the student is ready, right? And Linda was my teacher, right? And she said, all right, we're going to go through the columns. And she busted out the big book, which amazingly did not have dust on it, like mine. And she showed me her interpretation of doing column work and doing inventory work. And this is what it looked like. It's a 7-column inventory. The first column is who. Who are we mad at, right? The second column is why, right? Very specific why. Not random why, like, oh, well, she's a bitch. I love that. I love when people say that. I'm like, really? Why? Like, I'll just ask one more question. Why? Right? The third column is, how was I threatened? Right? That's the instincts column. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't think in instinctual terms. Right? I don't understand my instincts. I've spent my entire life avoiding my instincts, so I don't really know how to identify them. But when you put it into the form of a question, like, how was I threatened? Then all of a sudden I can get closer to it. Right? The fourth column is, how did I participate in the situation, right? What did I bring to the party? What did I bring to the party, right? The fifth column is, what do I wish I could have done different, right? And I remember when Linda would ask me that, she'd go, well, what do you wish you could have done different? I'd be like, what do you mean, what do I wish I could do different? I wish I could have stabbed him in the neck. That's what I wish I could have done different, you know? Because I was always defensive. It was never about me being wrong. It was always about you being wrong. It's as far as most of us ever get, according to the big book, and it's 100% accurate, right? It's as far as I ever got. Nobody had ever said to me, well, what do you wish you could have done different, Quincy? I had never thought about that before. That's a level of thinking that takes effort that I'm not interested in, right? Or used to be. What number are we on? The sixth column. A lot of damn columns. The sixth column is, well, why didn't you? What fear stopped you, right? What fear stopped you from behaving differently? Because at the end of the day, if I can't identify the fears that are driving my behaviors, I can't change the behaviors, right? And I came here thinking I was afraid of nothing. But let's be really clear. I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid you won't like me. I'm afraid of looking stupid. I'm afraid of not getting what I want. I'm afraid of losing what I have. I'm afraid of, not saying the right thing. I'm afraid of a ton of stuff, right? But I never realized that those fears were generating my behaviors, right? Because the seventh column is how do I behave as a result of this fear, right? Which is actually my 6-step list. And when she put stuff on paper for me, all of a sudden my whole brain got untangled, right? Like at Christmas time, we all have Christmas lights on the outside of our house, and we usually just rip them off, roll them up, and throw them in a box, right? That's what the inside of my brain looks like, right? And this column work process that she taught me through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous was a way to untangle all those Christmas lights, right? Because all of a sudden, if I can look at it clearly and see it as the algebraic equation that it is, then all of a sudden I can work with it. But when it's all tangled up and all mixed together, it all just magnifies and just feels larger than life, and I can't handle it, right? But when I take it apart one piece at a time, one situation at a time, one person at a time, then all of a sudden, I start to experience a level of freedom I didn't even know was available, right? I didn't even know was available. Within 5 minutes of sitting with that woman and doing one resentment with her, all of a sudden, I experienced a level of freedom I didn't know was available, right? I fell madly, madly in love with Alcoholics Anonymous in that moment because I had no idea prior to that, 13 years prior to that, that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is. I had no idea, right? I asked that crazy, scary lady if she would sponsor me. She was so excited, she looked like she was going to eat me. She's like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, Quince. Oh, yeah. I'm going to sponsor you. And I remember thinking, whoa. Easy, right? She was so excited. She said, but Quincy, she said, I have some requirements for sponsorship. And I remember hearing in my head, I have some requirements too, and that you have no requirements, right? But I didn't say it because I'm not dumb. And I said, all right, well, what are they? She said, well, Quincy, she said, I need you to call me every day for the first 30 days and a minimum of once a week thereafter. I said, okay, that makes sense, right? She's like, we got to stay connected. I said, okay. She said, I need you to go to 3 committed meetings a week. 3 committed meetings, meaning that nothing else gets in the way of those meetings. You don't make plans on those nights. You don't go to concerts on those nights. You don't speak at other meetings on those nights. 3 committed meetings a week that you go to. And she said, and one of those meetings needs to be a meeting that I'm in. She said, because if I don't see you, I don't know you, I can't help you. I said, okay, I can relate to that. She said, I have a sponsees meeting at my house once a month. We're going through the 12 and 12. And she said, I'd like it if you would show up for that. And I said, okay. I was like, oh, here we go, right? And she said, but this last one, Quincy, she said, this last requirement, this might kill you. I'm all about death. Like, bring it. What could it be, right? She said, well, Quincy, she said, it is a requirement of my sponsorship that if you are ever leading a meeting, speaking at a meeting, taking a cake, giving a cake, whatever it is, whenever you are in front of the room, she said, I require that you wear a skirt or a dress. Oh, yeah. And I remember thinking, where does it say that in the big book? Right? But I'm not dumb. And today I actually know where it says that, right? One of the places is at the end of the 9th step. It says, remember at the beginning, we agreed to go to any lengths to stay sober, right? Any length. Wearing a dress is a hell of a length. And I was like, okay, I'm like, really? Like, how bad could that be, right? At the time, I owned one dress. Today, I need to go to Dress Shoppers Anonymous. But at the time, I owned one dress. And I just remember thinking, it's not going to be a big deal because nobody asked me to speak. Like, how bad could it be, right? But I started to go through the steps with her, and I started to be sponsored by her, and I started to have a different experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started sharing about my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, all of a sudden, everybody wants to hear what I have to say. Didn't for 13 years, but now all of a sudden, right? Great, And because now I got to go buy dresses. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to spend money on dresses, right? Well, at the time, I'm like, nope. I don't want to wear a dress. So I wore the same dress for a long time. And every time I would get to the meeting and I would have to say, well, and I had to wear this dress because my sponsor made me, and blah, 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 blah. And I was just a brat, right? And she happened to be sitting in the meeting one day, and she looked at me, and she was the kind of person who could look at you, and she just went, right? Like she just cuffed the back of your head with her eyeballs, right? And I'm like, what? She goes, you don't get it. And I said, no, I don't get it. I go, explain it to me, Lucy. What is this dress magical thing, right? She said, Quincy, she said, the easiest thing I am ever going to ask you to do is to put your feet in a skirt and zip it up. She said, that's the easiest thing I'm going to ask you to do. And she said, if you are not willing to do that once a week, maybe twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. She said, if you are not willing to do that, she said, then you're not going to be willing to do anything else, and you are not going to waste my time. Boom. Drop the mic. Right? And she was right. Right? She was right. It has nothing to do with the dress. For those gentlemen out there who are trying to figure out how to make this work, you don't have to wear a dress. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, if you want to wear a dress, by all means, knock yourself out. But it has to do with being willing to do the stuff I don't want to do around here. If there was one thing that I could ever try to convey to a newcomer or an old-timer, whoever it is that's struggling with the bondage of self that is going on, right, is to be willing to do the stuff you don't want to do. Alcoholics Anonymous is not convenient. Recovery is not convenient. Spiritual progress is not convenient. Right? And the 2 paragraphs that she read for me that are in the spiritual experience at the back of the book, it says we can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. Right? What's an attitude of intolerance? An attitude of intolerance is judgment. It's me judging you whether I'm better than you or worse than you. And if you're anything like me, you can do that within the first 3 seconds of seeing somebody. Right? And I can immediately build a case about why I'm better than you, why you're worse than me, why you're better than me, why I'm worse than you, and why I do or don't have to participate, right? And then all of a sudden that why I don't have to participate, that rationalization, that's the belligerent denial, right? Those are the excuses I make for why my case is different, why I'm worse than you, why I'm better than you. And that's what my alcoholism looks like in a nutshell. I do that all day long when I am not spiritually fit. I do that all day long. But when I'm spiritually fit, I can show up and be present and see you as the person that you are and not take you personally. I don't know about you, my biggest character defect is taking your shit personally. Right? Everything. You're doing it to me. Right? You're not. You don't even know who I am. But you are. Right? The greatest gift Linda ever gave me, there were so many. But one of the greatest gifts she ever gave me was the ability to learn how to ask questions. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I was so afraid of looking stupid that I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to say how. I was afraid to say why. I was afraid to say what. Open-mindedness, the 3rd step, right, is really about learning how to ask questions, about how to be different than who I've been. And the only way to do that is to ask. I love when sponsees call me and say, I just want to catch up with you. I'm like, well, then leave it on my voicemail, because I don't have time, right? But if you want to call me and ask a question, I'll talk to you for hours. For hours. Because at the end of the day, you calling me and catching up with me doesn't get anywhere. Doesn't get us further. It's not even inviting me into the conversation. It's having a conversation at me, right? But if you call and you ask me a question, now all of a sudden you might get to hear some of my information. I might get to hear some of your information. Right? And that's how this whole thing is transcribed, right? One alcoholic talking to another. One alcoholic asking questions of the other. right? That's always what this has been about for me. You know, if you are new to Alcoholics Anonymous or you are old to Alcoholics Anonymous, I beg of you, one, to find somebody who can take you through the big book, page for page, word for word, and help you find the freedom that I have found. Alcoholics Anonymous only promises one thing, and one thing only, and that's freedom. That's all we're offering here. And don't worry, if that's not what you're interested in, you won't find it. Don't worry, right? But the other thing Linda taught me is that I'm responsible for my recovery. My sponsor's not responsible for my recovery. I'm responsible for my recovery. I'm also responsible for my happiness. You're not, right? My happiness is my job. It's not your job. But she also taught me that I am responsible for carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to you, and I hope I just did. Thank you.